Sekeres Price for Friday, March 22nd, 2024, coming to you from the Go-Goat Sports Studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. If you're heading to a game, any kind of event downtown, make it a staycation. Call the Wall, 604-331-1000. Ask for the Sekeres Price rate. Some blackout dates may apply. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price. Grady Sass, hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up, all brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood Nissan is at the Richmond Auto Mall. They've got 2023 Nissan Qashqai still hanging around, and you can finance those at just 2.99% for up to 36 months. Or join the electric revolution, the 2024 Nissan Leafs, and they get up to $13,000 in cash back, including the rebates. Go check it out, Applewood Nissan at the Richmond Auto Mall. It's all good at Applewood.
Tim Horton's poll question today is Nikita Zadorov worth $5.1 million per year over 4 seasons? Yes or no? You can vote at Sekeres Price on Twitter and YouTube, or roll up to win here for Tim's 60th anniversary. Play on the Tim's app, win prizes, daily cash jackpot, $10,000. Can win the all-electric Volkswagen ID4, a sun-soaked Hilton getaway. Download on the Tim's app, roll up on till March 31st. We are using those numbers because they come to us from AFP Analytics, which goes about looking at past data, cap increases, those sorts of variables, and predicting what NHL UFAs to be are going to get come July 1st when the market opens and the new league year begins. So those are the numbers from AFP Analytics, 5.1 million over 4 years. And Grady, if I'm not mistaken, they were pretty good last year, maybe a little under what the free agent class went for last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Probably a little over on some, a little under on others, but in the ballpark.
And that's the thing, is that if you think, oh, that's too much for Zadorov, well, I mean, they are under on a lot of cases. They were under on Elias Pettersson. So they said 10-6, 10-7.
So the question is, would Zadorov take any kind of hometown discount? Probably not, I would think. This is his big payday. I answered no, Blake. If I thought he could play top 4 minutes on the right side, I would do it all day long. But that hasn't been his deployment by this coaching staff. In fact, he's been deployed as a third pair defenseman. He's cameoed on the right side, but he hasn't played much there. Has played his normal left side. Now, hell of a game last night. Look, Hronek is the priority. I think Tyler Myers may give you a heck of a hometown discount. So I voted no, believing that you can fill out the third pair left side more cheaply, even if you're losing some of that mean toughness element that Zadorov brings on top of his last night goal scoring.
Yeah, at that price, he's being paid as a top 4, and I don't think he's a top 4 quality. He's to me, he's a fifth. He's a strong fifth who can moonlight in your 4 when you need to. But that's what he is. To me, he's not an everyday 4.
Right. And if you think he's a top 4, he's a left side.
Yeah.
Top 4. And I'm going to pay the right side defenseman because that's the scarcer position group.
Yeah. I don't think they're crazy asking for that, though. I think they'll quite easily get it.
Look, I think all the AFP Analytics contract projections are ballpark. I don't think any of them are too out of line.
No.
That's kind of what the market bears. That's what they look into.
And he's an interesting specimen with his size.
He sure is.
I mean, on the open market, the guy is going to get paid.
Absolutely.
On the open market, Matt,
absolutely,
he gets more than 5.1. I think he gets more than 5.1.
You think he's going to do better than that?
Yeah, on the open market.
On 4 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, if he has a big playoffs and he lives up to his
the other
rep,
thing. Great shout, Grady.
Big, mean defenseman.
Well, let me ask you this, guys. Has he improved his lot in life from where you thought he was what you thought he was going to get as a Calgary Flame? Has his stock improved because of the way he's played with the Canucks and the way he's behaved on the first place team?
I think it's at least held station.
I think he's improved it.
Yeah.
I don't know by a large amount, but
not by scads, but I
definitely playing on the better team and
and holding his own
comfortable role helps. Yeah.
And they have been very staunch defensively of late. He deserves some credit there.
Carson Soucy too,
for sure. Not to mention, he was fantastic last night.
Big Z energy. You get that one, Matt?
There's two different
Right
questions.
there, Grady. Well done.
Is the player worth this? And can the Canucks do this? Of course, are two questions, two different questions.
And that's where I arrive on no.
Yeah.
Because you've got a right side defenseman to resign in Filip Hronek, who is going to be quite pricey. And then you have a second right side defense position to deal with in the top four, whether that's bring back Tyler Myers or find a replacement. And those are expensive propositions, both of them, which is why I'm not spending the amount of money that Nikita Zadorov can rightfully command on the open market for my third pair left side defense.
Got to make sure it all fits in
and
the
if
puzzle.
you say he's better than a third pair left side defense, fair enough, fine. But they've played Carson Soucy more.
Mhm.
And Carson Soucy is under contract for next year.
Making 3.25, which is pretty good.
And that's a good price for your left side second pair, because then you can overpay a little bit for the right side second pair, who's more valuable. Right.
And which you almost always have to do.
Yeah.
With that profile of player. Let's get into our top story. TCB taking care of business. A non-playoff Montreal Canadiens team came in here playing out the string, and the Vancouver Canucks got up on them early and left no doubt in the third period. They win the hockey game 4-1. Zadorov 2 goals, his second multi-goal game of his career. Ilya Mikheyev with a couple of assists, his first multi-point game since December 19th. We had talked about earlier in the week, really for last week and a bit, that Mikheyev was showing signs, playing better, getting back to the style of game that we're familiar with, or at least that Toronto Maple Leafs fans were familiar with from his work there. So a good night for that line with Elias Lindholm. Casey DeSmith now 2-1-1 as the starter over this 4-game span since replacing an injured Thatcher Demko. Just 17 shots faced.
Back-to-back games with only 17.
That is extraordinary.
And they've allowed less than 25 shots in 4 of the last 5. Again, the Colorado game's the only outlier here. They have been so staunch defensively.
23 over their last 8 they're averaging against.
I mean, you're going to win those games. If you're only allowing 24 shots a game, you're going to win a lot of those games.
Well, how about 17 and 3 in the third period?
Yeah.
I mean, that is airtight.
Locking it down.
And way better than, they ultimately won the Sabres game, but I didn't love the style points. I didn't feel like they were locked down there in the third period versus the Sabres. There was enough frightening moments that I thought this is not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was nothing though for Montreal last night. It was perfect.
The Vancouver Canucks can clinch a berth in the Stanley Cup playoffs Monday. They got the Calgary Flames here on Saturday night. On Monday, they play the Los Angeles Kings here at Rogers Arena.
Yeah.
And that's a 6 p.m. start, incidentally.
Yeah, weird one.
Very weird. How about that? Clinching a Stanley Cup playoff berth on March 25th with almost a month.
I was going to say,
regular season
that
left.
really should be like a normal March 15th. It's almost mid-March with the way that we have, grown accustomed to the schedule. So the March 25th thing doesn't even do it justice.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. And
yeah.
I think this season becomes real, and it's almost there, but I think this season really becomes real for folks when they get to 100 points, with a handful of games left. Like when you've got 100 points,
mm-hmm. That's quite a barometer.
And then you've got more equity to spend, if you will, to get closer to 110. Like 110's it's a spectacular season if you get to 110 points.
Rick Tocchet was talking about Nikita Zadorov and said, look, we've been getting on him. You've got a good shot. You move your feet well. And he loves the profile of the shot too, because it doesn't require the big windup. Let's hear from the big fella, Nikita Zadorov, and his goals last night.
First one was simple, just to get the shot through. Loft had a good screen. It went in. It was a good puck placement, and then the second one, I just jumped in the rush, made a good play. I just had to hit the net there, pretty much. Yeah.
The other thing I like him, he's a pretty smart hockey player too. Like pursuing that third goal when he jumped in the rush and whistled one by. Like, he saw something there, made a bid.
I think he overthinks sometimes.
Possibly, yep. Look, every hockey player at some point is going to get paralyzed by indecision out there, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's part of the game.
But when he feels it, it's funny. Like, you know, you want to make sure Zadorov thinks he's having a good game in the same game that the coach thinks he's having a good game. Because sometimes you think you might be having a good game and the coach thinks you're taking too many risks. But you can tell, like, he was active last night. Once that second goal's in his back pocket and he's got 40 minutes of hockey left to play.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Like, he was hoping for a hat trick.
He's handling the puck a lot better. When he first came over, he looked like Lucas Sabiza at times, like the puck was a grenade.
Yeah, for sure. There is that risk of overhandling and over exuberance. And that's what I'm saying. Like, come playoff time where everything's magnified, where every moment matters 10 times more than it does in the regular season. I think Nikita Zadorov's either going to be spectacular or an absolute liability. I don't know whether there's much middle ground because he gets excited. He gets into a groove one way or the other, and we'll see if it bodes well for the Vancouver Canucks.
Yes, Matt?
Pizza.
Lucas Sabitza's pizza. Holy echo.
Yeah.
Pizza.
Thank you for that.
It's pretty
Matt.
much the same word in Russian.
Really? Yeah, I think they just co-opted it probably.
Sorry for the echo there, but
Yeah.
for effect.
Volume down, Matthew.
No, it's always down, but I needed to hear the
You,
Russian.
you definitely needed to hear that. Yeah.
Okay. Casey DeSmith. Canucks starting goaltender here with Thatcher Demko on the sidelines. Let's hear from Casey on how this team finished off the third period.
I mean, the third period was great. Just that's how winning teams finish out games, and I thought we really did that. Stayed out of the box in the third, chip pucks out, chip pucks in, and we just made it hard for them to generate offense.
I think that was his best game of the season. Or sorry, not maybe of the season, but that was his best game of this stretch since taking over. He's been good in other games, but I thought he made 2 to 3 like
The Gallagher save,
game changing saves. Where if that gets past him, I think the game unfolds differently.
I think you're right, and it's worth monitoring this because this is a guy who has been a backup throughout his National Hockey League career. Now he had a run of 6 straight starts last year in Pittsburgh. He's going to get there here with the Canucks. Fully believe he's going to be the goalie against Calgary on Saturday, against LA on Monday, and in fact Dallas next week as well. So, we'll see how he handles the workload, but quite right, and an encouraging sign that I think that was his best performance of these last 4. Let's hear from the head coach Rick Tocchet what he's made of his backup goaltender who's had to become the starter.
Every game, he's just been real solid, whether he's getting shots or not, he looks good. Like he's, even there when teams they go side to side, he's right there. Like he looks like he's seeing the puck, which is nice.
And if you subtract that Minnesota game where he got lit up, he's rocking a .908 save percentage without that game included. And that's points in 16 of 21 starts. 10 wins on the season. You can't really ask for much better than what he's gave them so far. Given.
Yes. Ian Cole was sat down. Actually, first let's deal with this. We talked about how typically the Montreal Canadiens come to town. They still have legions of fans throughout the country. Remember back when it was 2 solitudes?
There was more there last night than I thought would be there.
Toronto Blue, right? We thought it would be a tougher ticket for Habs fans this year, given the way the Canucks are going, given the demand to get back to Rogers Arena.
I don't know that it was, though. There was a lot of red.
There was still a lot of Habs fans in the building. Of course, I think a lot of them would have bought very early.
Yeah.
Right? The schedule comes out, the date. So you get your hands on the tickets before
the hot streak started.
Yeah, before season ticket subscribers go, oh, look at this. The Canucks are a hot ticket now, too. So, there's a lot of them in the building. The goal horn went off for their goal. I honestly think the horn operator just got confused, because there was such
taking a
a
bite
roar.
of his sandwich. He was taking a bite of his sandwich.
No, it just such a roar went off in the building with all those Habs fans. I think it was just reflexive. Hit the horn. Oh, wait a second. It's not a Canucks goal.
Yeah, I think it's possible. But hey, you're glad that it happens in a game where the Canucks are clearly outclassing the opposition, as opposed to like if that's a tying goal late in the third and you do that would sting a little bit more. In the end,
Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Right.
I make several of them daily on the show.
No,
and we note them.
Grady.
And account for them, usually. So, bit of a caveat there with today's Season 0 segment.
Mm-hmm.
Got to write them down in the moment.
Later on the pod. So, Ian Cole sits down last night as like somewhat of a load management scratch. We had wondered earlier in the week whether some of this was coming, not just for Cole, but for other defensemen. And Rick Tocchet gave a really interesting answer after the fact when probed about healthy scratching or load management scratching defensemen. Take a listen.
Well, it could have. Footy talked to the D today, and there could be, who knows, comes out. Next guy could be maybe a surprise to you guys, but for us, it's this is the way we got to go with it. And some guys might not like it, but that's just the way it is. We're gonna have to keep everybody on their toes, and and sometimes the guys coming out doesn't mean he's playing bad. It's just that we have to do this right now. I thought Juleson was really good tonight, so we'll have to sleep on what we're gonna do next game.
So it sounds like he was saying you're going to be surprised at what we have planned, but then he comes back to it at the end and says, we're going to sleep on it and decide what we want to do. So I don't think there is a decision yet.
What I do wonder I wonder several things. Number one, is there going to be an effort to get Juleson in there regularly so that he's sharp for the playoffs? Number two, might the scratches go beyond the Ian Cole level to Tyler Myers? Carson Soucy? Is there a world where you sit down Filip Hronek on a load management scratch? I mean, Hughes, I think, might be the only one untouchable there, Blake.
It's a lot easier decision to make in April. Once the calendar turns and you're that much closer to clinching the division, I think it's a lot easier decision to make. And you're right. I think you probably can go all the way up to Hughes. Matt, last game of the season, I might consider Hughes too.
Well, if you have everything clinched, I think you can sit Hughes down as well for load management purposes. But I think the rest of them, you might be able to sit down in advance of that.
Yeah.
Probably not likely with Hronek, but conceivable. I mean, there have been a number of games this year where you've watched Hronek play and go, oh, okay, he's fighting through some pain now. And he plays a hell of a lot of minutes still. What's he playing right now?
24 minutes a night.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
just under.
That's 23:40. That's putting in a shift. Hughes at 24:43. Although I get the sense that Quinn Hughes is tracking towards Duncan Keith. And Duncan Keith just play half the game and
yes.
Still be fine. Go out there 2 nights later, play half the game.
No sweats.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have to be wary. I mean, the Canucks are 8 points up on the Oilers, so it sounds like home and cooled. Got into this with somebody on Twitter the other night, though. I mean, the Oilers just keep winning, and they are better than the Canucks over the last 10 games. If we reduce this to the common denominator of 67 games, Canucks have a 4-point lead on the Oilers. Through 67 games, the Canucks were at 92 points. The Oilers are at 88 points.
Holding all tiebreakers, right?
Yes.
Or can Edmonton actually surpass them in the tiebreakers?
No, probably not. No. Regulation was 5 right now, so unlikely. But it's closer than it appears. Through 67 games, it was a 4-point lead, and that's where the Oilers are at 67 games. So, if they usurp it, they win their 3 games in hand, it's a 2-point lead. So you do have some work left. I think once you win the night, if the Canucks could rip off, and they're 2 games deep after back-to-back wins here, if they could rip off a 5 or 6 game winning streak here, which has been a while since they'd gone onto a streak that long.
Well,
if they go that long of wins, I'm talking. Yeah, it's over.
Well, we talked to taking care of business was sort of our theme, starting with the Capitals last Saturday and through the Flames this coming Saturday. Washington is still in it in the East, but Buffalo and Montreal are not, and Calgary barely in the West. So you had a schedule that's set up to do just that. Now it gets a little more difficult after Calgary because LA is fighting and scrapping, not just for a playoff spot, but for seeding potentially. Get in the Pacific.
Hold
Division.
off Nashville at this point.
Well, yeah. I mean, Nashville, just the 2 losses beyond regulation, so points in 16 since their canceled
That's
trip
a franchise
to Vegas.
record.
They beat a very good Florida team too last week, without
hope,
Barkov.
I just hope if you're an NHL player next year and your team has a social gathering planned to Vegas or elsewhere,
you better be going good.
You better be going good because believe you me, coach and GM have taken note of the Predators and what happened after Barry Trotz put them on punishment and said, no Vegas for you.
Seattle hasn't won since the trade deadline. They could have done all those teams a whole bunch of favors by beating the Golden Knights. They could have done themselves theoretically a favor too, but they're kind of out of it. But they haven't won since the trade deadline.
Oh,
like that stings. That stings.
And the Mariners get going next week, so Kraken is just going to fade into.
Oh yes,
yeah,
it's over because the Mariners are undefeated.
Wow, Mariners are undefeated, and it's draft season for the NFL. So, and Wazoo's advancing in the tournament here. Who knows? They could be a Sweet 16 team. Okay, Vasily Podkolzin. He gets his first point of the season. It's an assist on the Nils Oman goal, and nice to see Nils Oman getting back into the goal scoring column. 8 games in now for Vasily. We got a note from our buddy Frank Seravalli during the game last night saying, well, he's intent on finishing every single check tonight. He has taken the body at every opportunity.
Leads the team in hits every night now.
Yes. Are we basically seeing the transformation of Vasily Podkolzin that, okay, top 10 pick, you'd like most top 10 picks to play in your top 6, being an offensive contributor, but maybe that's just not going to happen for this player. And maybe he's better served to do everything he can to be that bottom 6 winger, physical presence, forechecker, spade work, and not worry about the production. Are we seeing that before our eyes here, Blake?
No, we are not. This is a guy who's 22 years of age. Bigger players throughout the course of time have shown us that they take longer to develop. He's had a 14-goal season in the National Hockey League already. No, I think there's absolutely a world where I still see Vasily Podkolzin scoring 20 goals and getting past 50 points in a season. Now, you might still say that's not top 10 overall. It is. A 10th overall pick, 20 goals, 55-point player. That's a 10th overall pick. It is.
That would validate the draft position.
Yeah. And I still absolutely think there's a world in which that happens.
I mean, if you want to play the woulda, coulda, shoulda taken this guy,
right?
You can do that with just about.
That's a hell of a powerful position.
No, I mean, every single team and most draft picks ever, you can play that game.
Yeah.
All right, so you still have faith. 20 and 50 plus seems a little ambitious to me. Just when
I'm just saying that's to me, that's the ceiling.
Yeah, but when I hear that, I think long way to go to get there.
20 goals and 40 points.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that. Absolutely. I don't think that's a crazy ask in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. Elias Lindholm, we found out, is fighting through an upper body injury. That may well explain some of the lack of production for Lindholm in his Canucks career. He did get an assist on the first Zadorov goal on Thursday. So as a Vancouver Canuck now, it is 21 games and it is 8 points, a even split, 4 goals for helpers.
I don't know that it does explain it because we have seen him look very good at times on the forecheck, which, like if you're looking for signs, like what's not there. Last night wasn't great in the face-off circle, but he's been a meister in the playoff circle, face-off circle. Forecheck at times has been spot on. I mean, he's not shooting a ton, I guess, but I mean, I don't know. I don't see any symptoms other than just the lack of counting stats, I don't see anything in the way he's playing that tells me he's injured.
29 shots in 21 games as a Canuck.
Yeah, you like that. You'd like that higher.
With a 13.8 shooting percentage. Playing 17:47 a night.
And the minutes,
and the minutes they're coming down because of the way they're using them. And you do wonder whether that is, had a discussion about his minutes. It was on yesterday's show, actually. But that would explain the minutes coming down as they've come down. Because a lot of his lows as a Vancouver Canuck have been over the last couple of weeks here, as opposed to early in his Canucks tenure, when he was being leaned on and played a lot like a top 2 centerman and all situations forward, which he is. 16-22 against the Montreal Canadiens, and that's above and beyond a number of games recently here. So, look, I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about a player that needed a handful of games, perhaps a few more than we all would have liked to get acclimated, to get comfortable here with his new team, new teammates, new digs, then some sort of injury coming up that, hey, I'm a new player here, I got to fight through that, and add it all up, and you get what Elias Lindholm has been here over a quarter of a season, right? 20 games is a quarter of an NHL season. He's played that here in Vancouver now, and the good news is he still has a dozen games left here to find his game and hopefully not exacerbate that injury. We shall see. Jonathan Lekkerimaki, Canucks top prospect, had a terrific year in Sweden. His team has been eliminated from the Swedish playoffs. So when last we heard from Patrick Alvin, the Swedish national team had reached out and basically asked, hey, we think he's going to make our team. Are you okay just leaving him over here and not bringing him straight to North America to begin his either Abbotsford Canucks career en route to the National Hockey League? Rick Dhaliwal reported Lekkerimaki is coming over here. Now, there is a world where he could potentially play for Abbotsford. And the idea here would be that now, first of all, he's a signed player. They've signed him to his entry-level contract. But there's a world where he could sign a PTO right now, play for Abbotsford. The PTO could be terminated. He goes back to Sweden and plays for the Tre Kroners at the World Championship. And then his ELC kicks in on July 1st with the new league year.
Yeah. Or they just bring him over and say, eat this, train like this.
And here's the rink in Abbotsford. Here's the downtown rink. Here are some of your future teammates. Here's the city of Vancouver. Yeah. Basically just start the acclimatization process on the life side of this, not just the hockey side.
Yeah.
And what is Abbotsford on the road here coming up? Is that
there is
what makes people
a
think
road
that
trip coming up?
Maybe he's a little less likely if they were on a big homestand that maybe slides in, but
they're not back for a week.
Okay.
So, he's expected here this weekend. Abbotsford's not here. So, the chances of them sending him out on the road, I think, is few and far between if he's only scheduled to be here for 8 to 10 days. Do they hold him around for, the April 2nd, April 3rd game? Maybe.
We'll see. Let's get to today's menu. It's brought to you by Greta. Fantastic spot right downtown to catch the game throughout the season. Quick walk to the rink or stadium, go-to spot for food, drinks, fun before or after the game. Make it a game night at Greta at 50 West Cordova and at gretabar.com.
And thanks to Baconator for sending us the
shout-outs. Very cool. Baconator's from Prince George, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
For checking out Greta on his trip down here to the city. Longtime listener and contributor to this program. Frank Seravalli is going to join us. Took last week off after trade deadline. A lot of talk on Filip Hronek, Nikita Zadorov, Chances of getting both these players re-signed. Also talks some John Tortorella after his antics this week in Philadelphia with their captain, Sean Couturier, because Frank's right there in Philly. And of course, that has been one of the big stories around the Torts back at it again. Hashtags, the best and worst of Twitter coming up. Frygate has come to a conclusion, laid to rest, put a bow on it last night.
Has been put in the ground like a potato. Yeah.
At Rogers Arena. J-Pat will stop by, playing to talk with Jeff Zadorov. The goaltending, this new lockdown defensive team, Cole, Podkolzin, wingers for Pettersson. It all comes up with Jeff. And then we'll go to the people we go, where we take your feedback on mostly Canucks-related topics over the course of the last week. Read it out on the show and discuss. Thank you for your contributions there. Plus, later in the podcast, we tell you where you can get tickets for our event on April 20th at the Hollywood Theater in Kitsilano, raising money in the name of Jason Bochford, celebrating his life and legacy, and of course, pointing forward to the playoffs. We have not had a playoff game at Rogers Arena for 9 years. That's about to change next month. Frank Seravalli coming up next.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
NHL insider Frank Seravalli joins us from the Frankly Speaking podcast and the Daily Faceoff after a well-earned week away. Welcome back, Frank.
Thanks, guys. Good to be back with you. Just you can still kind of see the backwards hat tan that I had going, but it's slowly fading.
You get that? Oh, the half moon. I do see it.
When you're sitting at the swim up bar, you just got to make sure that your neck isn't getting crisped in the sun. So you just put the backwards hat on and slide it down a little bit.
There you go.
The secret. Only when you're having to catch with your kid in the pool for about 8 hours a day.
Right.
There's only so many. You got to buy a ton of virgin pina coladas, and then the rest you can kind of enjoy yourself.
How's the rotator cuff?
Yeah,
all the throwing.
It's sore. Yeah.
Daddy again.
So I traded speed bagging GMs and agents for info.
Yes.
And I traded that for having a catch.
Oh, there you go. That's
Tanning
good.
tips
Good
with
trade.
Frank Seravalli
Good
coming up
trade.
next week here.
Can't tone it, tan it.
Yeah.
Speaking of good trades, Nikita Zadorov's the belle of the ball these days for the Vancouver Canucks. He's not a perfect player.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look back at that trade for the Vancouver Canucks, do you think they're going to love it come playoff time? Because he certainly has upped it in the last couple of weeks anyway.
I do, and I think it really was the perfect blend of knowing that this was a guy that you're very unlikely to be able to afford, and to give up a third and a fifth. I mean, it's the right price, the right addition, the right stylistic ad, and you're perfectly comfortable at the end of that shaking hands and saying, good luck, sir. Cash in on the market. It's not going to be with us, but we were happy to use each other throughout this process.
Yes.
AFP Analytics projects he's going to be a $5.1 million player over 4 years. Does that sort of jive with what you're picking up?
100%. That was the asking price, I think. Not that they ever really got into negotiations in Calgary, but they knew that number was likely to start with a 5, which just made it so much easier to part ways with him. I think basically the Zadorov camp, not to put words in their mouth, but if I were looking at the market, I'd be thinking, hey, I'm a more mobile version of Eric Goodbranson that with the cap increasing, why shouldn't I be using that as the absolute bare minimum and floor and going from there?
I think we understand why the Canucks may not be able to afford him, but why do you say that? Why are you so certain that it's going to be a handshake after the end of the year and good luck in your future.
Yeah, and is there any change in it? Like, what if it's a magical run in the playoffs?
Look, I would never say never. I would just say I think that was their thought process heading into it. It always can change. But I think more often than not, this is my own personal opinion now, is like team building philosophy and cap management. I think you tend to get in trouble with players at that pay scale for that term. It feels like if they were to go down that path, that it would be a reboot of the Tyler Myers deal that they hated for so long until they didn't.
And he's
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and he's a flawed player. Like there are nights where he makes some really bad decisions. And generally the big players make loud mistakes too. I find, not like a Tyler Myers kind of thing. So he's a flawed player. So yeah,
he's a 4.
If you're gonna bend over backwards for him, boy, he better be pretty reliable.
He's a number 4 defenseman in the NHL. And that's the truth. Someone will pay him. I would make the argument that if you're the Canucks and dollars, obviously you're at a premium and need to be doled out responsibly, I'm not paying my number 4 defenseman that kind of money.
And, if he could play the right side, if I loved him on the right side.
Well, if he's a right shot, I think I'd bend over backwards.
Different, but he's cameoed over there, but he hasn't been consistently played on that side.
They're already going to need to spend a lot on the right side.
Well, and that gets us to our next topic.
Segue. Look at that. Back from vacation. I never lost
it. So heard what you had to say on Canucks Conversation about Filip Hronek, and that any kind of talk that he's going to have to take less than Quinn Hughes is phooey.
Mm-hmm. I think the comparison I made was a Corvette and a Prius. These are not the two same things. And by that, I mean not comparing the style of players, but an RFA deal and an UFA deal are two totally different types of contracts in the NHL.
Right. And of course, Quinn Hughes was nowhere near unrestricted free agency. He was purely an RFA when the Canucks re-signed him to 7.85. Filip Hronek is 1 year away from unrestricted free agency, where he would be one of the rarest birds in UFA. You almost never get a young, right shot, two-way, all situations defenseman hit unrestricted free agency, in which case bonanza, right? What I'm interested in is you think he's a $7.5-8 million guy in arbitration?
Yeah.
This year, if it gets that, what are the comparables there, Frank? What brings us to that number in arbitration?
Counting stats, 35 even strength points, 45 points overall, 24 minutes a night. I mean, then go back and size up the market and look at the deals that have been signed. I mean, he squarely fits right in that range. I mean, it's a no doubt. Don't lose any sleep. This is what the arbitrator is coming back with. Here's the problem for the Canucks is they can't go down the arbitration path. It's not all that different than Pettersson in the sense that, okay, you walk him to ARB, which walks him to UFA. You got to trade him before the season starts because you don't want to be going into the season saying, man, we really need to recoup assets for this guy who's such a huge part of our team. But we were trying to make the playoffs and win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
So there's a timeline to this, and it's really before a player can file for ARB. That's the deadline. That's the similarity with Pettersson. And I think to this point, to be fair, like I'm not presenting it as anything other than it's been totally status quo. Everything's on good terms. To my knowledge, I think the conversations have been preliminary and the Canucks know they need to get to work on this file, but at least unless something changes, I don't think it's going to happen between now and the end of whenever the Canucks are playing.
All right, is there too many sunk costs here? I mean, is it a fait accompli that they have to sign this player, that they will not trade him for another player under contract saying, okay, we just can't afford it in our cap situation? Or again, if they just spent so much that they don't want to deal with the PR disaster or anything else?
I don't I don't think it's a fait accompli at all. I
No.
mean, I would say that different teams have different lines that they want to draw in the sand. If the Canucks want to stand on principle and say, this is our cap structure, Quinn Hughes is our best defenseman, and no one is making any more than him, well, that's fine. It's just that someone, like as mentioned with the Arb case, if that's the Arb this year, why would you take less than that to
Going
then
forward,
sign
yeah.
an 8-year deal when the cap's going up?
Right.
Like it makes no sense from the player's perspective. And so I think the other part of what you start to get into after that is the Canucks would be in a really tough spot trying to trade him, because then you have a guy that's already done all of the heavy lifting to get close to free agency. All he has to do is raise his hand and say, I'm not engaging in any negotiation with any team if you acquire me, and I am going to market. All that does is absolutely plummet the return that the Canucks could get. They're dealing probably in 50 cents on the dollar in what they were looking at in what they gave up, a first and a second.
Mhm.
And more than that, I think there's real risk for the Canucks. And frankly, if we're being fair, there's risk for both parties here in that he's been such a great fit with Quinn Hughes and a no maintenance type player.
Mhm.
It's a risk for them to then have to go out and find another right shot guy who
that's it.
clearly fits, but it's also some risk for him in that wherever he goes, yeah, he might get paid, he might make the money, but he might not find a fit where he's as important and valuable and productive somewhere else. So
Well,
there's some
yeah.
mutual, I don't, what do they call it? The MAD theory, mutual assured destruction. here?
destruction. Yeah.
There's
Cold War.
there's a healthy bit of that, I think, in general with this moving forward.
Yeah, but I do agree with Blake in that they're pot committed here because of what you cite, the partnership with Hughes. And if you're looking for one player who keyed the turnaround from terrible Canucks season last year to very good Canucks season this year, it's Filip Hronek.
That's the point I made yesterday with Quads was,
Yeah. It's
Miller's here,
unequivocally.
Pedersen's here,
Right.
Hughes is here, Demko's here. I know the coaching change has been a huge part of it, and you could make the comments about the bottom six and the penalty kill and the other couple, defensemen that they brought in, and Cole and Soucy's been good. But
Right.
the one thread to me to all of that, it has been, the Canucks had an engine. To me, Hronek has been the jet fuel to then have that take off.
Right. I mean, if you want to argue healthy Demko, yes, absolutely.
Sure.
But of course, what team without healthy goaltending is, able to play at this level? But the one addition to the group this year that has really made them go has been Hronek.
How about this, guys? I mean, I'll be the first to say, didn't love the JT Miller contract when it was signed. He's probably going to be a 100-point player this year, which means most likely,
Again, by the way.
most likely, the next 2 years are probably very profitable seasons for JT Miller in terms of points per game. Maybe you've got a couple of seasons at the end of this contract that you wish weren't there, but at $8 million in 28, 29, who knows what the cap's at, but that could be pretty palatable. Could we make the argument for a guy that's younger, much younger in Filip Hronek, that if you pay him 8 now, like how soon until you don't really care about that $8 million? Like is the cap going to be going up at such a rate here where $8 million's pretty doable for a number 2, number 3 guy in your team?
Just back of the napkin math, 28, 29, the cap should be somewhere between 120 and 125 million bucks.
Which, $8 million is nothing at that point.
Right. So I would say for right now, like, let's just say operate under the hypothetical that let's say this lands at 8 times 8, and it's a place where player is probably pretty satisfied. Team is probably grumbling a little bit. Fan base is probably grumbling a little bit. The next few years while you're in your competitive window, like, to me, it's way better to have the known commodity that works versus having to go out and find it again.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
I think the longer it goes on for a guy that will, in a few years will still be sub 30, like I'm looking at it saying there's really no risk on the part of the Canucks. Like, let's say you get 3 years in or 4 years in and you want to change things up. That's not going to be a contract you're going to have an issue moving. I mean, look at just from a pure counting stats basis, going back to when he first got into the league. I said this when I first joined you guys and talked about Hronek, and I said that this contract would be a number that started with an 8, and everyone laughed at me. He's a 0.5 point per game defenseman, and he's a right shot guy. Like, that's going to be the going rate. And I don't see that number falling off a cliff. Like, his production isn't suddenly going to end, and you can make whatever comments you want about not driving his own pair or whatever it is. You don't need him to drive his own pair. You've got maybe one of the best pairs in the entire league, if not the best. What more do you need?
Mm-hmm. I mean, and he's in all situations defenseman too. Like, he's out there in every important situation. He's their number 3 penalty killer on defense. He can play power play. He just doesn't to the extent because of Hughes. So you don't think 8x8?
But by the way, so like, why dick around with this? To just be blunt with my thought process. So is Quinn Hughes going to be pissed that he's making $150,000 more than him on the cap?
I don't think so, knowing that he's about to be making $14 million a season in a couple of years.
Well, so that's my point. What do you like? What's 100? First off, what's $150,000? Like,
absolutely nothing.
Is it the optics of you need to be King Kong on the cap that you feel like just from a pure? I've never gotten that sense from Quinn Hughes. Do you guys think that that's something that he would care about?
No, again, and this is the flex contract of Filip Hronek. Like, it's not getting any better. He's not signing another deal, Filip Hronek. And
this is
Hughes,
This is his only chance.
My version of that contract is going to be twice that contract.
Right.
I didn't look today, but I think his career earnings are $9 million. Like, this is it. This is his big boy deal. Quinn Hughes has already gotten lifetime security. The next one is going to just be, how big your house and your fourth house are and your boat are.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
So you think
I can't imagine him getting in the way is my point. And so if Quinn Hughes is not getting in the way, why would the Canucks stick their nose out and get it out of joint over a seemingly a rule, an arbitrary rule to make a rule?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't think it has any merit.
Right. So you think 8x8 gets it done then with Hronek?
I don't know, but I would seem to think so.
Okay. Am I quibbling by saying 8x7? Like, do you think the extra year means something to Alan Walsh?
I don't know. I would think that where he's at, he'd want to get the 8th year. I would want to get the 8th year. By that point, he'd be 34, like 33, 34.
Yeah, still probably pretty decent.
You're probably not pulling in 8. You're probably, the next one might look like a 4 or a 5.
Right, yeah.
So you'd probably want that 8th year to maximize your earnings, but that's how I would think.
I wonder if that's a place to save some dough if they can negotiate on that number then rather than the 8.
All right. Give our best to Torts. How's he doing these days?
Well, I don't know. Haven't seen him. Usually head coaches come out for post.
I haven't seen him.
I knew if I threw that out there.
I mean, honestly, like, is he only getting reinforced though by the results? They get points in both of the games that he benches Couturier. So is he only being encouraged in some ways?
Look, I don't know John Tortorella at all. I only, I've seen this act for a long time. Just knowing what I think I know about him and from other people that know him really well, it feels like benching Sean Couturier and winning, like you might as well have just hooked him up to, something, shoot it right into his veins on Wednesday after the win.
Yeah.
Because that was to then double down.
Yeah.
I mean, so let me just, for proper context, like give you my thoughts on the Couturier part of it. I've watched this really closely. He hasn't been great, but I could think of 4 players to pull out of the lineup before him.
Right.
So, okay. So you make your statement, you win. Does anyone really think the Flyers are better with a Selke trophy winner in their press box than on the ice? Like I think at some point you begin to lose it. The rest of the team who's sitting there going, hey, we know Sean Couturier should be in our lineup. And the point that I made on social media yesterday, which obviously no context in a tweet, people don't understand. They're like, why do you care? He's not accountable to you in the media. And I agree. That wasn't the point of my tweet. But when you have your captain say he doesn't like the way he's been treated, and when you have his agent come out and say he's been ignored, he doesn't owe me or any fan or anyone else any explanation. But when you don't give one to your captain, I just think that's shit.
Well, also, I think accountability is a two-way street. I would argue he does owe the fans an explanation.
Well,
I mean, Couturier is their captain and a guy that you go to the rink to watch. I mean, he's not a bonanza box office guy or anything like that, but to the extent that he helps the Philadelphia Flyers win hockey games, you want to see him in the lineup if you're going.
But why be a weenie and just not? I'm going to let my assistant do the press.
So
conference.
let me ask you this: we saw that Flyers blog earlier in the weeks. Go back and find the receipts on John Tortorella being adamant there would not be a captain this season. So is the theory here that John Tortorella got usurped on that decision by upper management, and that so he's grieving it the only way he knows how?
In talking to Flyers sources, they had mentioned that things were going sideways at one point this year, and it was John Tortorella that came in and said, I think we should name a captain. It was, maybe 2 weeks before they ended up doing it publicly. So it was his idea. And I get the concept, like no one is safe. We could scratch anyone at any time, trade anyone at any time. That's fine. But to do it once, great, message received. To do it again and make it seem like it feels like you're making it about you at that point.
Mm-hmm. Geez, not the first time we've thought that with John Tortorella.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, look, the line is pretty long. You've seen Brendan Dubinsky smash Tortorella on social media this week. Everyone's been waiting for a Roberto Luongo tweet. I mean, there's plenty of history to suggest that this is going to end, and probably not well for Tortorella at some point. It might not be this week or the end of this season, but this is the type of stuff that you get in your own way too much.
Well,
why can't you just, this has been an unbelievable Jack Adams type year for you. Why
exactly?
Why do this to yourself? Why self-destruct?
I was going to ask, could the guy go from Jack Adams finalist to out of a job, especially if the Flyers miss the playoffs after all this?
I think that would be a stretch, because the Flyers, he has one of the most unique seats at the table in terms of power and control in an organization right now. I would say it's Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh, Rod Brindamore in Carolina. I do think Rick Tocchet has a pretty significant amount of sway in Van. Short of that, I don't know how many people would be ahead of John Tortorella in terms of control and say. I don't think he's going anywhere. But like I said, when the players start to despise you, when stuff like this happens, the shelf life is never long.
Right. Great stuff. Thanks for this. Enjoy your weekend. Till next Friday.
See you guys.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying with Sekeres Price on YouTube, I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.